You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Dr. Bant Breen on the show. Bant is a noted marketing and media executive, entrepreneur, and academic. He was inducted into the American Advertising Federation in 2010. He's the founder and chairman of Canary, an award-winning global professional reputation management and talent branding solutions company. Bant also holds a PhD and lectures on marketing, executive reputation, and artificial intelligence impact on media. Welcome, Bant.
It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Okay, so there's so many interesting things that I'd like to talk with you about, but let's talk about first about the current company that you have. It's a multi-million-dollar company, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. And
you bootstrapped this company to get to multi-millions, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, if somebody had presented me a check for hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know if I would have said no. But, I think that when I started Canary over a decade ago, the company basically, we focus on this idea of executive online presence and reputation management. So we kind of help people grow their online presence, and then we also protect them when things go terribly wrong for them. I think that what we did was I initially launched the company. I raised a little bit of capital to build kind of the minimal viable product. We have kind of a platform technology that runs the business. And I raised that money really quickly, like I would say in a matter of like a week and a half. And I got really cocky. I was kind of like, people talk about raising money. It's so hard, we sent money on the MVP, and I then went out again to raise more money because we were ready to go. And it got really hard. It suddenly was like not so easy to raise money. And I quickly kind of got into a mindset where I could see how so many ideas get crushed because they're so dependent on that next raise. Like if they don't get that money in, they're basically cooked. And so I made the choice of kind of building a more sustainable model, a more sustainable business. And when we were able to do that, that kind of allowed us to really bootstrap it. In many respects, it kind of forced us to be more aware of the customer and what the customer wanted. At times, we perhaps did things a little bit more custom than we should have when you're trying to grow a tech company. But I'd say, here we are 10 years later, standing, growing. We're a global business. Our revenues, north of $12 million a year. So it's, there you go, right?
There you go. Okay. So something to be said about not using other people's money is what you're saying. Because I find that sometimes people get that money. It's almost like it's monopoly money to them because there's no pain in getting it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really tough moment, John. I don't mean to cut you off, but there was a moment where we were kind of given that kind of green light that we were going to get a check in, and we were very excited. And I'd taken the team out for dinner, and the gentleman, the investor, had said, "Yeah, the check will be there before midnight." And midnight came, and nothing came in, and it was that morning after I was like, never again am I going to be in that position where, somebody's whimsy changes their mind on what they want to do. Right. So that's, I think that's the challenge. So I generally would say it's a tricky one. I talked to a lot of, in fact, actually, even last night, here in Miami, I was chatting with some young entrepreneurs, and they were very excited because they'd raised a lot of money on kind of very, very high valuations for their businesses. And it sounded really sexy, but I was also kind of like telling them, like, there's a caveat there, guys, because these investors, they give you the money because they don't think you're going to get that. You're not going to justify your valuation, and they're going to kick you out of the company, and they're
Mm,
also going to take a huge chunk of your equity,
right.
right? So
Mhm.
you kind of have to manage it as in a more balanced way.
Right, because the more money you get, the less money you make. After all years of work, you sell it and you get almost nothing because you've gotten so much money from other people. So let's go back. First of all, congratulations on your success of bootstrapping it. Let's go back. How much money were you initially given?
Oh, wow. That the first MVP we probably raised maybe like 400,000.
Okay, so you got 400K.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to hear step by steps because it's lovely to say, hey, people, bootstrap. It's lovely to
Hmm.
say, don't take people's money. What did you
Yeah.
do to bootstrap exactly? Like, say somebody's listening right now. We hope they are, and they're like, okay, he's saying not do all the fundraising. For certain things, you would have to fundraise because it's such a big thing to build. But yours clearly can be bootstrapped, the kind of service that you're providing, right?
Yeah.
So, what did you do? You had 400K, so that's not nothing. It's not exactly bootstrapping.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, look, we were building a technology platform,
mm,
and so that initial money really kind of covered off the building of the initial platform, and then bringing on a couple of the core people that
mhm,
drove the company.
right.
In terms of kind of specific things, probably the most important thing, and this is it's now strangely enough kind of a bit of because I'm at a different moment in the company. I'm
Mm,
kind of reconsidering this whole thing,
mhm,
and then I'll even caveat this even more. Coming from someone who's been a marketing and an advertising person my whole life,
mhm.
we spent literally almost nothing on marketing and advertising.
Okay.
So we certainly worked on sales and trying to get
Mhm,
direct sales and building
mhm,
relationships, but we didn't spend on marketing and advertising. And
mhm,
I see, I see these companies now that have these massive marketing budgets. They're
mhm,
spending maybe 30-40% of their kind of overarching budget on growth, right, on
mm,
advertising. And I guess that kind of can make sense, but I mean, if I had done that, obviously I would have had to raise a ton more money to
mhm,
justify that growth.
mhm,
And you have to kind of have you have to do a big enough raise where you have to kind of a 3 to 5 year window
mm,
really to manage that. So I would say that we were thoughtful in terms of our hires, we were
mhm,
thoughtful in terms of our tech spend, things like that. Nothing more than anybody else would be.
mm,
But the biggest area where we did not spend was marketing and advertising.
mhm,
And a little bit of that was related to the fact that it gave us a little bit of time to find our kind of product market fit, strangely
mm,
enough,
mhm,
because whilst our growth was a little bit slower in the first couple of years, it
mhm,
gave us a chance to really know our customers, know what was working, right? And then when we were ready, then we were able to kind of expand those efforts. We've
mm,
never really spent a lot. In fact, now, you know, we're at a moment where really I'd say to probably go from where we are now, which is
mhm,
kind of the, low 10 million, that kind of 10 to 20 million range. It's
mm,
to get to the $100 million range, you have to advertise and market, but
right,
I wouldn't start there, you
right.
know?
Okay, so you're like me because I'm an organic marketing specialist, and
Mm,
I got to several millions with. I mean, I tried advertising just to test it, but that's not what
yeah.
worked for me, and I didn't start that at first. It's just
I mean,
grass.
it's a weird feeling, Joan. I don't know how
Mm,
to tell you. I love advertising and I am a big believer in it. But
mm,
I definitely had kind of a flip of mindset, which was that it certainly wasn't the place to start. And it
mhm.
was to understand the customer and to build the product. It wasn't
Agreed.
the place to start, you
Right,
know?
because there's a lot to be said for grassroots market research and just getting those clients through relationship and speaking with them rather than I think a lot of companies raise all that money and they just throw ads at the wall, but they haven't done deep research, which is grassroots research. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So you're helping people. with online reputation, but first you're
Yeah.
helping them with brand awareness. So you're still a marketing company.
I mean, I certainly feel like we are doing sometimes for people in some ways what I was doing for brands, for
Mm,
sure.
mm,
In fact, that's kind of the anomaly that really triggered the creation of the business to start out with.
mm,
You know, I would go into companies and I would see companies willing to spend just millions and millions of dollars on their brand. But
mm-hmm,
when I kind of highlighted to these people that, in fact, actually the engagement that your senior management is getting is like
mm-hmm,
20 times higher than your brand,
mm-hmm.
and maybe it's worth investing a little bit of money
Yeah.
behind these folks,
Mm,
it was kind of like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm nervous.
mm,
And so that kind of was the eureka moment where I realized that there was maybe an opportunity to build
mm.
this out.
Okay, now with the online, what do you do if somebody's reputation has had a hit? What do you actually do to fix that?
I mean, it really depends. I mean, one of the things for us, we have what's called our ORM offering, Canary ORM, which is
Mm,
online reputation management. ORM is kind of the acronym that
mm-hmm,
has kind of taken hold in the industry for
mm-hmm,
crisis management.
mm,
And I would say that, we as a company have some general principles that we operate under.
mm-hmm,
We say that we don't make bad people look good; we make good people look spectacular.
mm-hmm.
And so we have a bit of an ethics. We have an
Right.
ethics panel, and we review things. We don't. We actually turn down a lot of
Mm.
ORM
Shady
customers.
characters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I understand. You're not gonna make criminals look good. Okay, so we were
Correct.
talking about something a minute ago, about this thing that the entrepreneurs that start a company in their 40s are
Mm.
more successful. Tell us about that, and did you start this company when you were in your 40s?
So you were very kind with your introduction of me. I was awarded this kind of fancy award by the Advertising Association in the United States,
Mhm,
and I had dinner with my father that night afterwards, and he said, "So, they just put you in that Hall of Achievement. So, what are you going to do next in your life?" And I was like, "Going to go back to my job on Monday and continue."
mhm.
He goes, "No, no, no, no. They don't. They put you there because they're kind of like saying you got to go do something different now." And
So they're
so
actually giving you the boot.
yeah, so I kind of thought about it, and I had been kind of thinking about this, concept for a while. I think that there's certain types of people, and I probably fall into this camp, which is I always wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Mm,
I was always setting things up when I was a kid, and
mhm,
then as my career progressed, I found myself in kind of big corporate gigs and
mm,
doing big corporate stuff, and I felt big and fancy, but there was something hugely missing in my
mm,
life.
mhm,
And so when I had that feeling, I told my wife at the time, I said, "Look, I'm going to start kind of like saving a chunk of money, because if I have that eureka idea, I'm
mm,
going to go do it."
mhm,
And so that was tough. It's tough if you have a partner in your life to basically say, I'm taking a third of my salary and putting
mhm,
it away
mm,
for a while. But I was ready, and by right around 40, I started the business. Now, the
mm,
advantages that I think 40-year-olds have versus, let's say, a 20 something, would be that you actually know something,
right.
and you actually know people. And so I would say the first 200 customers that we had were all directly out of my Rolodex.
Wow.
So it was kind of like we were able to kind of draw on my relationships, build the business that way.
Mhm,
The second thing is obviously that you also know something about probably what you're starting. So I had been involved as an entrepreneur for many years, starting
mm,
lots and lots of services businesses. And so I was able to kind of utilize that knowledge to be more efficient on tech spend, be more efficient
mm,
in kind of how we did a whole bunch of things.
mhm,
So generally speaking, there's a ton of research out there that says that people in that mid-career range do succeed. Those businesses succeed much more often than startups by very young folks. And
Mm,
I don't want to discourage young people to start businesses, but
mm,
I do want investors to think about that a bit,
mhm,
because these are people that have a ton of expertise, a ton of
mm,
connections. And really, when you think about the success of a business, it's how do
mm,
you network your business into the network or ecosystem that it plays in,
mhm,
right? How do you get customers?
mhm.
I think that somehow sales has become like a dirty word for a lot of people,
Yeah, right.
but effing embrace it.
Mm,
Embrace it. It's wonderful to sell. And
yes.
if you have an idea, you should be proud of selling that idea.
Right, right. Okay, so
Yeah.
regarding the, 40-year-old
Sorry.
brain, I agree with you because there was a book that came out about 10 years or more ago, and it was called something like The Wonders of the Middle-Aged Brain. And it was basically saying people in middle age are way smarter, much smarter at processing stuff, but there are certain things that happen like our brain bifurcates where we put images and names. And that is why people in middle age can't remember people's names because it's putting it in two different sections of your brain, which I thought was fascinating. I thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's why I'm not remembering names. But that was like one disadvantage. They were just saying how people, as they're older, are way smarter because we've learned so much and we are processing at a much quicker rate. Of course, I'm not talking about like these 20-year-old boy wonders that are geniuses.
Yeah.
Okay. But I agree with you because I invest in various companies and I was meeting with a very young CEO of a startup and his business idea was great. Because he's not just the business idea. It's not just about that. It's about the fact the guy was 20 something. I did not invest in that company.
Mm,
He had no experience with exiting a company. Smart
right.
guy. He had a really very well known billionaire mentor, but the mentor isn't running that company. The mentor is investing in a lot of companies. So just because the mentor invested in the company doesn't mean it's going to be a success. Just means
Yeah.
that that's somebody he's mentoring and he's given a few $1 million to help him out, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm just really trying to kind of maybe balance out the discussion about that kind of romanticized version of the entrepreneur
Mm,
who's, in their college dorm room and
right.
they crack the world. I'm fortunate to be the father of one of these kind of math prodigy type children, and I understand his brain works. They do
Hmm.
say that when it comes to kind of high level math and
Hmm.
quantitative thinking,
Mm,
you basically kind of peak at like 30.
hmm.
So I get it.
Mm,
With coding, certain elements with machine learning, if
mm,
you're focused on that, yes, there is something to say about
mhm,
youth for sure. But when you're talking about
mhm,
commercial success, which is understanding how to operate a business, understanding how to tap into networks,
mhm,
understanding how to prioritize and deprioritize, and then also just building on existing relationships. Like a startup really needs things like banks,
mm,
insurance,
mm.
healthcare, like all that type
Yeah.
of stuff. So, when you're 40, you have relationships. Like you're able
Mm,
to kind of network it more thoroughly and more properly.
mm.
And yeah, I just see it working better.
I
So
don't know if it's just about the networks. A lot of people don't have great networks, and some of these 20-year-olds have fantastic networks. I think it's about life experience of negotiating other people,
yeah,
and that you've seen things come around quite a few times, like being ripped off or not, learning how to trust certain people. So I think it's the how to deal with people part is
yeah,
not there. So you could have the best idea in the whole world, and it's great, but if you don't know how to negotiate, somebody could just rip you off, and
yeah,
the company could go down, and that to me, the guy was great, but he was 20 something. And I thought, well, he's never exited. And so this person is betting on him. That doesn't make it a good investment for me because when you're investing in companies, you're investing on the pony. That's the
hmm,
CEO, as well as everything else being in place. Okay, great. Now,
yeah,
one last thing I wanted to ask you about. You're an expert at AI and media. And
hmm.
you talk about the impact of AI on media. What is your two bits about that? Because you know about this. And, we all certainly use some AI to create media. I know I do. But what's your take on this in a nutshell?
Well, so, I mean, I did my PhD looking at the topic of machine learning and creativity. In the like 20, I wrote it between 2018 and 2020. And I got to know obviously a lot of these companies that have become the unicorns of the AI generation, and like OpenAI and all these others. And I would say that one of the first things that we have to reflect on is that the AI that is taking hold today is wonderfully helpful. However, it is all derivative,
Mm.
almost completely derivative, which is that if you go and type into any AI model and ask them for a summary of my thesis, it will go to my thesis and it will literally pull my summary of that thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of questions on intellectual property still,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Just from a text-based perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what I don't necessarily, and even if you use any of the design tools, you'll see some of the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So what we tend to do today is that we have our own kind of wrapper solution in the AI space that operates as kind of a drafting tool for us. So
Mm.
creating kind of first, second iterations of ideas, idea
Mm-hmm.
starters, things like that. We certainly always have teams of humans, people reviewing, editing, changing, evaluating, and we certainly don't post anything out that hasn't been reviewed by the customer.
Mm.
So I guess you know how things will progress in the future. You know, I don't think it's going to be like as smooth sailing as everyone seems to think. There, to get to the next phase of machine learning requires still some major technical leaps to be made in terms of processing power and the nimbleness of a human brain is not something that should be underestimated.
Mm.
So we watch these movies and you'll talk to your parents and grandparents and they'll freak out about AI, but the reality is that we're going to see it as a valuable tool. Hopefully over the next couple of years we'll see it as a valuable partner. um, all of the concerns about ethics and things like that are warranted.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, it's something we need to keep a very close eye on. But in terms of kind of like that massive leap to the singularity, which would be kind of that
Mm.
moment where
Mm-hmm.
essentially the machines take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that we're still at a derivative moment of intelligence.
Mm.
I know I could have a huge debate with my son who does a lot of this stuff on this, but there's still a path to go. I
Mm-hmm.
find it helpful. We use it.
Mm-hmm.
I would support people using it. I also would tell people to be, I'm a little surprised that the media is not more critical of some
Mm-hmm.
certain things in AI. They tend to be critical of things that kind of maybe touch their own lives a bit too much.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the reality is that the processing energy utilized for AI is exorbitant. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely ludicrous, and I think to date has not shown the efficiencies yet to justify that energy usage.
Right.
That's a huge thing if you care about sustainability, which
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm.
So I think that there's things like that need, when I'm talking about these steps that need to be taken,
Mm-hmm.
that they may not be related to you kind of being able to design things, you to be able to write things, but
Mm.
for us to scale this so that it becomes like almost like a active member of your life or
Mm-hmm.
in your company and your team.
Mm.
There's some things that have to happen to scale this properly.
Mm. Okay, so specifically, how is it going to affect media and media creation?
So, I mean, today, if you use any of these tools, you'll see that you'll be able to write prompts. Prompts would just be something like I would like to have a woman in a blue shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be able to I would say over the next 3 years, you'll have successful models that would create essentially original video of
Mm-hmm.
a woman in a blue shirt.
Right. I mean, they already have voice to image already. That exists.
Yes,
You
yes.
can create films through.
But these are all kind of drafting tools. So there's things that today I would say are kind of at that drafting table that
Right.
can save time, can slightly iterate the process of creation. There's a point that will come that, literally, I think you would almost be able to kind of draft it almost like a very high level prompt level. So you wouldn't have to. Right now, it's kind of a support technology. I
Right.
guess in the future, it's going to be more of a direct
Take over.
producer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Bant, this was all great. What's something you want to leave the listeners with, some sort of mindset or philosophy?
Well, my motto for the company has always been this phrase, find a way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, there's probably a nasty way of saying that, like find a way. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the way we look at it is more that it's really important to kind of keep thinking and approach problems with not an idea that they're a roadblock, but they're a moment to have to rethink your challenge and maybe sometimes rethink the problem in the first place. And so every time we've kind of come to a moment of change in the business, we kind of embrace that find a way principle. Like all companies, COVID presented a ton of challenges for us, and we had to kind of rebuild the whole business during that time. And a lot of the employees will highlight that find a way mentality, the idea of, when you hear about those stories of NASA and when we had rockets that were stuck on the other side of the moon and how did you fix them? And, how they had to kind of figure out how to do it. That's kind of that mentality.
Right.
And embrace it, because that's life. Like that's the fun part of life, like thinking and solving. So.
Okay, great. So that problems are learning experiences. Bant, thanks for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please subscribe, please share, and spread the love, and we'll see you on the next episode. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.